Okay, I guess it's my turn. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for hanging in, and also thanks for the organizers, Steffi and Maria, for giving us the stage here to talk a little bit about biodiversity collections and biodiversity in crisis. So we have heard a lot about feeling nature, experiencing nature, and I would like, how does it work? Okay, was it me? This one. We have heard a lot about experiencing nature, feeling nature, and the oceans. We have not heard really a lot about the oceans. 2 times coral reefs were mentioned. I will talk a little bit more. But the oceans cover more than 70% of our planet. And the average ocean depth is around 3,600 meters. So basically, our planet could also be called ocean, and a deep ocean planet. And when we talk about feeling, one moment in my life changed my whole perception about nature. It was the first time I was diving in the Red Sea in 1990, my first open water dive. And since then, I have devoted my scientific interest and career to the rainforests of the sea, coral reefs. Coral reefs, and this number is quite astonishing, I find, harbor more than 30% of marine biodiversity, although they only cover 1% of the ocean surface. So it's a really, really compressed biodiversity hotspot. And we also have heard about economic value and putting dollar or euro figures on biodiversity. The ecosystem services coral reefs provide in terms of coastal protection, food, pharmaceuticals, novel pharmaceuticals, tourism, etc., are estimated to be more than 10 trillion US dollar per year in value. However, this is a beautiful picture of a coral reef. Not all coral reefs look like that, unfortunately, anymore. And since I did my first dive in 1990 in the Red Sea, I have seen this ecosystem change dramatically. Because multiple human-made stressors put reef at risk. Pollution, nutrient runoff, overfishing, plastics, land reclamation, and above all, climate change. Because, and this goes through the news, an ocean or an ocean basin not too far away, the Mediterranean, is heating up, brings us a lot of rain. Ocean warming is very, very critical for coral reefs because ocean warming causes so-called coral bleaching. This is when the corals lose their symbionts that they need to sustain their living. And when we have mass global bleaching, we're currently in the 4th or just past the 4th global mass coral bleaching, reefs at very large scale die. And projections are that we lose 99% of coral reefs by 2100 if we continue business as usual in terms of CO2 emissions. And when we lose 99%, we lose nearly 30% of marine biodiversity. So it is really important to protect and conserve these ecosystems. Coral bleaching, we have seen one picture already. They turn white, and sometimes, but not too often, they recover. And if they don't recover, a reef looks like that, like a desert. All the inhabitants go away. The corals get more fragile. They're overgrown by algae. A storm comes and it's basically a rubbish field. So we need to do something. We need to do something to preserve the beauty and the richness of these ecosystems for future generations. But what can we do? The International Coral Reef Society, where I'm a long-term member of and currently the chair of the European chapter, we published a position paper on rebuilding coral reefs, a decadal grand challenge. What can we do? We identified 3 pillars. One, of course, is reduce global climate threats, CO2 emissions. We all know it's easier said than done. But we can also act at the local or regional scale. We can improve local conditions, we can improve water conditions, we can marine protected areas to improve fisheries. We also can invest and should invest in active restoration. It's not as easy in the ocean to restore an ecosystem as it is on land, so a scale is a problem here. But we also need, and this is why this is a fantastic event, we also need to promote successes where things improve. We need to be better in communicating the successes, and we also need science-based innovations. And how can natural history collections help? They provide a baseline of objects, of species to assess changes. So we go out to the coral reef, we collect specimens, we bring them back to the collection, and we have a baseline from where we can assess change. Frank, thank you.
This is the rainforest of Panguana. This is a research station and a protected area in the Amazon region of Peru, where many scientists from the SNSB are studying the animals and plant diversity since more than 20 years. This forest is well protected, but in the surrounding areas you can see immediately a lot of logging of rainforest and of conversion of rainforest into pasture areas and agricultural areas. Tropical rainforests harbor 40 to 75% of the global biodiversity, and their efficient protection is crucial not only for carbon storage and climate regulation, but also for all the animals, for the countless species which live in these forests. However, rapid deforestation by logging, expansion of agriculture, cattle ranching, and other factors still continue to occur in most rainforests of the world. SNSB scientists are contributing a lot to biodiversity research in tropical rainforests on all continents. Now I will show you one example from Madagascar, a country with a very small rainforest area where I am working since more than 30 years. Madagascar is usually among the 10 poorest countries in the world, and the human population has tripled since 1985 from 10 to 30 million people, which is of course a big problem for nature conservation. Slash and burn agriculture has already destroyed 90% of the natural vegetation. Nevertheless, more than 1,000 species of amphibians and reptiles can still be found in Madagascar, and almost all of them are endemic to the country or endemic to a small region in the country in many cases. Was geht? Geht nicht weiter. Sorry, something is going wrong.
Andere Seite.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. So, during the last decades, we have discovered hundreds of new species in Madagascar. 310 of the new species we have already described, but more than 100 species still await their taxonomic description. So you see here a small collection of these species we have described. Most of them are small species. Many are very colorful. Some large species like a boa and other bizarre animals are among these species. The crazy thing is that every additional expedition reveals two new species, so that the real diversity, the actual diversity, is much bigger than we can estimate so far. So, the SNSB collection and the fieldwork with local partners provide the basis for our work. So, on this basis, we have published a field guide as a resource for research, for ecotourism, and for education. And also, we have used the amphibians and reptiles as the model groups to optimize the designation of new protected areas. And finally, we also have determined the conservation status of the threatened species in collaboration with the red list of the IUCN red list in order to make sure that we know which species are really threatened and which species need to be protected with highest priority. Yeah, so what about the future? 50%, when I started my research in Madagascar, there was a publication in Science that suggested that 50% of the rainforest was already lost in 35 years. So the study compared aerial photographs from 1950 and compared it with satellite images from satellites, and so they calculated that 50% of the forest was gone. And they also predicted that if the pace of forest cutting continues, then by the year 2020, almost all rainforest in Madagascar would be gone. But luckily, these predictions were incorrect, and I can tell you here that we have the year 2024, and we still have a lot of forest left in Madagascar. And as you can see on this graph, even by the year 2050, a lot of forest is estimated to survive. So the good thing is, the positive news is that we have probably more time for conservation measures to protect this unique biodiversity of Madagascar. And this is, of course, a good news. And I think if we are able to protect the biodiversity in Madagascar, we will also be able to protect the biodiversity in the rest of the world, because these problems in Madagascar are usually at a very large scale. So I think that is still a good reason to hope that we can continue to protect this biodiversity. Thank you.
So we've now learned what happens in the oceans and what happens on land. But what happened in the past? The past is the key to the future. And actually, it's not the first time that temperatures have risen. During the ice ages, temperatures often went down slowly and then shot back up relatively quickly, not as quickly as right now, and then down slowly and then up relatively quickly, in multiple cycles. So we had a warm period roughly every 100,000 years. And during the colder stages, so the glacials, we had many large animals. Jan Haft already indicated that. And to give you an idea of, for example, the size of mammoths, I brought a strong young man, who will...
Don't.
So this is a mammoth tusk. It's a relatively small one, actually. Most were bigger. And if you would like to touch it later on, you can. I'll be around after closing. Thank you. You can put it back down. There were many other animals as well. There were woolly rhinos. There were cave hyenas, cave lions, cave bears, saber-toothed cats. And all these animals were part of what we call the mammoth steppe fauna. And the mammoth steppe is a tundra-like grassland. And these animals and the mammoth steppe were very closely related. They were dependent on each other, not just the animals on the mammoth steppe for food and a place to live, but also the other way around. The animals provided just the right amount of disturbance, just the right amount of heavy trampling. They grazed, and then they pooped out the seeds many kilometers away from when they were eaten, which is quite different from what a mouse would do. And all this contributed to this particular ecosystem. And as temperatures would rise, the animals and the mammoth steppe would move north towards Siberia, and they would be replaced by more subtropical animals coming from the south. And here in Central Europe, we've had hippos, we've had straight-tusked elephants, forest rhinos, even monkeys. And as temperatures would cool down again, these animals would move back south, and the animals from the mammoth steppe would come back in. And they would replace each other during these cycles. And they could migrate freely because there were no roads, no cities, no agricultural land. They could migrate without obstacle, quite unlike today, unfortunately. Nevertheless, we no longer have woolly rhinos or cave hyenas. Now, we have to keep in mind that animals that are very specialized, like the animals of the mammoth steppe, they are more likely to go extinct than more generalist animals. So, as an example, the cave bear, which was dependent on vegetarian food, he was a pure vegetarian, and needed caves to hibernate, went extinct. But the brown bear, which eats anything it can get its paws on, and can sleep in a hole under a tree or hibernate in a hole under a tree, is still around. So what happened? You should know this. Jan Haft already gave the answer. We happened. We competed for caves with animals like the cave bear and the cave hyena, depriving them of a place to hibernate or to bring forth their offspring. And we hunted large animals like the mammoth for food, for clothing, to construct shelter. And so even as hunter-gatherers, we already had a profound destructive effect on the environment around us. And as these animals slowly disappeared, so did the mammoth steppe. So an entire ecosystem, the mammoth steppe, disappeared because of our bad influence. And we should learn from that.
One minute. Just a couple of closing comments. I'm preaching to the converted. World's biodiversity is in crisis. And thanks for the snapshots. Conservation and management of biological resources needs science-based action. Markus Söder this morning talked about shaman, so opinions and woo. We need science to feed into action and not opinions or shamanism or whatever. And I think this is a very strong point that I would like to make, natural history collections are at the core because they provide the hard data in terms of specimens to feed, for example, into models who predict the future. So we need natural history collections, and we are very fortunate to have one of the best, worldwide best natural history collections here in Bavaria, and I would like to thank the Bavarian state for keeping them and nourishing them. Thank you very much.